Okay, well, it is 7 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Portland Urban Beekeepers June member meeting. And I'm Cheryl Wright, the president. And we will get started. So, we always like to start with why join the Portland Urban Beekeepers, because as you know, you're allowed to come to the Zoom meetings. Those are free of charge. Part of our mission in the Portland Urban Beekeeping Club is to educate people about bees, and this is one great way to do it and let people get a taste of what it's like to be a beekeeper before you make big investments. But for $25 a year, if you join Pub, you have access to free library books, which also includes candle molds, DVDs. We have equipment that we offer for free, except for the motorized extractor, which we do charge $10 for and is currently out of service. But we have three manual extractors. We have a refractometer, we have a BVAC, observation hive, a frame jig. So all of these things are for your use. We also have our swarm list, which has been hot and heavy these last couple of months, with over 90 swarms reported. And then we have our Bee Buddy connections, which I'll discuss a little bit further in the presentation. We have pub classifieds, which aren't really as exciting now that we have Facebook. And of course, we have a nice Facebook page, and you're not required to join PUB to be on the Facebook page, but we do offer things for free and items for sale. You cannot sell insects or living things on Facebook, which I think is a great policy, but other stuff you can. So we often have things offered on the Facebook page. And then we have free beekeeping opportunities at the club apiary. So support the mission. It's only $25 a year. And I just want to make a real broad and firm notice that the motorized extractor is out of service until further notice. It's at the mechanics. It's being worked on. We're not sure what's wrong with it, but it's lost its power to spin. So that is, we will let you know as soon as that gets back into service. We still have our three manual extractors though. And our apiary work parties at Green Anchors, which is in North Portland, just next to Cathedral Park, will restart in July. So the first and third Sundays of the month, just show up. I think that Tim, who is he's sort of the apiary person at Green Anchors. So when you're looking at this photograph, you're looking at Tim's apiary, and we're just set behind it. But Tim, I think, would appreciate it if you could park outside of the fence. There's a big cyclone fence, and then walk to the back of the area, and it's towards the river. And as you're walking back along a dirt road, you'll see sort of a canopy, like it's a it's a structure with a metal roof on it that's sort of open, like a pole barn, if you know what a pole barn looks like. Anyway, so then our bees are right behind that, but that would be our general meeting space. So again, the first Sunday in July from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for all of you beekeepers who are a little bit anxious because we're not gathering together in a room on Wednesday nights. This is your chance to socialize. So our apiary manager, Bruce, will be ordering some supers. So some of the work that we anticipate may need to be doing as putting these supers together and or painting them, and then just doing some basic inspections, and maybe a bee wash or two, an alcohol wash or two. So again, this is just north of Cathedral Park. The address is there, 8940 North Bradford Street, and everybody's welcome. Just make sure that you go to the Portland Urban Beekeepers website and go to the apiary tab and sign the waiver. It's an electronic waiver that you need to sign before you come out, saying that if you drowned in the river, we're not at fault. If you fall on your hive tool and have an unfortunate and fatal impalement, again, that's not our fault. Just that kind of stuff. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And we just want to have a big shout out of congratulations to Ian Horvath. He's the winner of the 2021 Portland Urban Beekeeper Scholarship. And you may ask, what is this? We were advertising this earlier in the year, and every year we offer this scholarship for students who've been accepted into the Oregon Master Beekeeper program. And there are two programs now. So that's the Master Beekeeper or the Melitology, which is the study of all bees. And we will reimburse your tuition for successful completion of the apprentice level. If you want to check out the Oregon Master Beekeeper program, I've put the website down there. It's a fantastic program. I'm in it. Many of the people in Pub are in it. It's a great way to learn how to keep bees, and very well put together and well organized. So congrats to Ian. Now, our Bee Buddy program, this happens to be something that Ian worked on too to help us get our, we had an old Luddite type map in the back of the room when we had our meetings. And now we have it on the website. So all you need to do is go to our website and log in. So you have to be a member to access this. Click on the resource tab, go to the Bee Buddy map, and then there's a hot link. And so you can put in your information there or you can change it. Just use this form and fill it out and choose if you want to be a mentor or if you're a learner. And it'll take a few days for the information to be added to the map. But then once it's added, you can just click on the icons around you and you'll get the contact information for the beekeepers in your area. And so this is what it looks like. It's very handy and dandy. And more it's being populated, but I would ask for the more experienced beekeepers in the club to please go and add your name. We have a lot more learners than we have mentors. So please, if you'd like to get to know some of your neighbors who are interested in keeping bees, you don't have to be an expert. If you know anything, you know more than the brand new beekeeper. So please sign up and let's make this thing go. I just want to reiterate that we have had this poll going on. This is a 3-month poll. We've had 101 responses. It started in January, so we did all of January, all of February, and all of March, asking the questions. Once the pandemic is under control and most people are immunized, would you like to continue with Zoom meetings or do you want to resume in-person meetings on Wednesday night? And so you can see that the majority of people have chosen to continue with the Zoom meeting. And I think it's just because it's so much more convenient. I know that there is a hard core of the pub members who would like to continue meeting in the Wednesday night, but I'm offering you the Green Anchors experience instead. And who knows, maybe in the future, maybe in 2022, we'll go back to in-person meetings, but right now this seems to be working for most of us. If you have any issues with that, please feel free to email me at thepresident@portlandurbanbeekeepers.org. So our speaker lineup for 2021, as I said, Zoom until further notice. In July, Chris is going to talk to us about keeping bees and logs. And somebody needs to mute themselves. Can you just make sure you're all muted? Thank you. So in July, Chris is going to talk to us about keeping bees and logs. In August, we're going to have Dr. Sam Ramsey talk to us about Tropo laelaps, which is another invasive parasite from Asia that we're hoping never comes to the United States, but we have to be alert for it. And in September, Dr. Dewey Karen is going to talk to us about the Africanized honeybees in Oregon. Should we be worried? And this is our new log hive that Chris has put up in Portland Urban Beekeepers Apiary. And we want to thank him very much. And hopefully we'll get that populated either with a swarm or probably with a swarm. It seems like everybody's swarming. It's been a really big year for that. The weather's been just perfect. So that's what it looks like. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can come out and play with it and look at it and see if that's something that your apiary needs. Thank you, Chris, for that beautiful hive. Bee School 2021 is live Zoom. So we're doing it like this, where we have people live, and then if you miss the Zoom, then we're sending you the recordings. So far, we have 81 students enrolled. This has been very popular. We've done February 18th and May 13th, so the next meeting will be July 15th. We'll be talking about the honey harvest, the robbing behavior, queen events, diseases, and pest management. And then in September, we'll be talking about fall and winter management. So if you have anybody who's interested, please let them know. We have decided to keep the enrollment open through the end, just so that people can catch up if they haven't, if they've been interested in keeping bees, and they can always go back and catch those earlier Zooms, which will be sent to them. And this is our first Bee School 2021 class that we had out at the apiary, teaching with the hands-on with Susie and Dewey and Tim, and I think that went really well. So it is so good to be post-pandemic and vaccinated. And Dewey couldn't be here tonight. He had a conflicting meeting, but this is Dewey and Tim Wessels, who was the founding president of Portland Urban Beekeepers, and he's out hosting our apiary at Green Anchors. So he's still a foundational and fundamental part of PUB. And Dewey does every year, he does this Pacific Northwest Honey Bee Survey, and he presents his data, and he will be presenting more of it, but I just wanted to give you some of the preliminary findings. And if you want to find out all of the nitty gritty details, if you go to this link here, you can find not only the results from 2021, but also the prior years. I think he's been doing it since about I want to say maybe 2015, so he has quite a bit of data. So the nice thing about his data is he does it specifically by club. So this is a 2021 loss survey that looks directly at Portland urban beekeepers. And you can see in 2014 that we had about 61% loss. And we have a nice descending trend line, although we lost a little bit more this year than last year. I don't think that's probably statistically significant, but it looks like 2019 was a really bad year. So this is what we're always striving to do, is push that number down so we have more successful overwintering. And that's what the club is geared to do, is help you successfully bring your bees through the winter healthy. So the next slide, this looks at commercial beekeepers in the red line. So you can see that commercial beekeepers have quite a lower loss rate than Oregon backyard beekeepers in general. And then what you see that is somewhat disappointing is that Portland urban beekeepers is tending to run above everybody. So we're having higher losses in general than the rest of the Oregon backyarders, and a dramatically increased loss compared to the commercial beekeepers. And when I talked to Dewey about this data and what some of his explanations might be for this, this gap in survival, it kind of makes sense. There are a lot of brand new beekeepers who join Portland Urban Beekeepers, and then they will fill out this survey. So I think a lot of it is just a learning curve, how to keep bees, how to get them through the winter. And I know that as a new beekeeper, I certainly lost my share of colonies, and that's part of learning to keep bees. You're going to have losses. The other thing is that commercial beekeepers have a very systematic approach to beekeeping. This is their livelihood. They take it very seriously, and they're not reactionary in their beekeeping. Things are on a schedule. They start feeding in January, they start treating immediately, and they're treating and splitting and paying attention to these bees all the time. So Dewey felt like that might be another explanation for why they had much lower losses than even the regular Oregon backyarders. At one point, when we had the higher loss in 2019, it looked like the data might suggest that Portland urban beekeepers tend to keep more non-traditional hives like Juarez and top bars. This year, we didn't have that, that skew in the data. It looks like most people were dealing with Langstroths. And then just a little bit of points from his survey. So he wanted to let us know that 54% of pub respondents only had 1 or 2 fall colonies, and 29% had 3 to 6. 8 respondents, or 10%, had more than 9 colonies, but nobody had more than 13. And 8 of 52 members had no losses, so that's pretty good. 17 respondents, or 33%, reported a total winter loss of colonies, with the heaviest loss at 8 colonies. 12 PUB survey respondents had only 1 year of experience, and 48% had 1 to 3 years of experience, and 12% had 9 or more years of experience, with 41 being the largest number in years. And the most common was between 2 and 5 years of experience. So you can see that Portland Urban Beekeepers, as a club, we really are newer beekeepers, so the losses can be expected. 35 of 52 respondents, or 67%, said they had a mentor available as they were learning beekeeping. And that is one of our roles as a club, is to help people mentor beekeepers to get them through these seasons. So again, there will be more loss numbers keyed into management, which means, like, did you feed sugar water? Did you feed pollen patties? Did you feed in the spring and the fall? What were your treatment plans? How closely did you follow your varroa mites? Did you have a rain guard on? Did you insulate the hives? So there will be a lot more granular data about how people who were successful brought their colonies through the winter. And that will be up on the website in the next couple of weeks. All right, so let's segue into late spring and early summer and our bees. So what are the bees doing? So remember, June 15th is about the time when our adult population is going to be the largest it's going to be. So our spring has been about building up our colonies. The colonies have been swarming, and in July forward, they're going to be decreasing. And so remember this when you get really excited about catching swarms. Late season swarms aren't always the best idea, because it's really difficult for them to build up and then be strong for the winter. And what are the mites doing? And this is what Dr. Sagili is going to talk about today, but you can see that as our adult population reaches its apex, the mites now in the middle of June and July will be starting also to build. And this is a logarithmic expansion of mites. And so in the end of June and beginning of July is a critical time to start thinking about mites, having a plan. And what should we be doing in our hives in June? Well, continuing to monitor your bloom, keeping a record, keeping a good hive log. If you have new colonies, you want to continue to feed them and monitor. If your colonies successfully overwintered and didn't swarm, maybe even if they did, your supers should be on and planning for a honey extraction in late June, maybe July and August. And non-flow summer management, and this is from Dewey's book, Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping. So we want to, after the extraction, clean up those supers and either keep them in a place where the wax moths can't get them, or put them back on the hives so that the bees can start storing honey for the winter. Allow your nectar to ripen into honey. If you pull and look at your frames and they aren't capped over, then it's not ready to pull and harvest yet. Remove and repair your comb and equipment that's in need of repair. Consider trapping pollen. Optimize your hive configuration. Consider rearing queens, and consider making summer or fall nukes. Just to review what a good brood pattern looks like on your left, that's what you want to see when you're pulling your frames out. If you see this spotty pattern on the right, you have a problem. So hopefully if it's a failing queen, hopefully you can identify this early enough that you can get another queen in there, or watch the bees, they may be making their own queens. Again, what healthy larvae and eggs look like: the nice moist or pearly white. The eggs are put in the center of each cell. So this is what you want to see when you're pulling out your brood frames and doing your inspections. And this is what you don't want to see. So on the left is American foul brood, and this is something that it takes a while to look at, but it has a little bit of a bad odor, greasy. It just obviously doesn't look as healthy as the slide before. And on your right is a European foul brood, which is more of a spring, an early spring disease. So we really shouldn't be seeing this much now, but you can see how the larvae is twisted and yellow. It's a little bit different. And this is something that as you go along, you will become more familiar with. Hopefully not from personal experience. Remember that Glenn Anderson at Bridgetown Bees has a nice What's in Bloom slideshow on his website. So if you want to familiarize yourself with some really good flowers to put in your garden that the bees really like, you can visit Bridgetown Bees and What's in Bloom and take a look at his slideshow. And he will be back to give us a presentation in July. Does anybody have any questions about anything? If you do have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. You can send them to me privately or you can send them to everyone. Completely up to you. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Ramesh Sagili from Oregon State University at the Department of Horticulture. He is really active in the Oregon State Beekeepers Master Beekeeping Program and does a lot of research on honeybees and Varroa. And today he's going to talk to us about how to manage Varroa mite effectively by understanding its biology and the available mite treatments. Ramesh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cheryl. Can you hear me well?
I hear you very well. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. I will. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for all of you for spending some of your evening today. I'll share my screen and see if everything goes okay here. Cheryl, you should be able to see my screen now.
I do. It looks good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, hope you all are, at least most of you are vaccinated, and I'm glad. And I was surprised when Cheryl was. I mean, I knew some beekeepers have really loved Zoom. I know that's one thing positive that has happened in COVID. I would say is. There are people who really like the Zoom format. I think I have heard from some beekeepers, they say they can focus more because if they're sitting in a big room, sometimes it's hard for them to focus. So it looks like the Zoom is becoming more popular. But I know you need those personal interactions with beekeepers too. Yeah, so it's a little challenging, but yeah, I was surprised to see 60% or more were willing to still go with Zoom. That's impressive. Okay, so what I'll do is, as I know Cheryl gave you a lot of good information on what to do. I was impressed in 15 minutes. She covered a lot of things. And so what I'll do today, at least, Cheryl, do I have like 45 minutes plus questions or?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm notorious. I go over time all the time, and so I can keep you until midnight as well if you have time. But we'll not do that. I'll respect your time and try to finish in an hour, maybe max. Um, so yeah, I have a lot of information, but I'll try to be as quick as possible in some things. And I believe there are probably several of you are new beekeepers. You just started keeping bees this year, so I'll keep that in mind as well and not go into too complex information that may be hard to digest as a new beekeeper. So before I start, I just have a couple of announcements. I know Cheryl mentioned that this is a good year for swarming. Yeah, of course, we have seen so many swarms already this year. And so I don't know, Cheryl, if you received an email from either the Oregon State Beekeepers Association or about a swarm study that we are doing at this point, looking at, so when we talk to, at least there are a couple of studies that I'm aware of. So when you talk about swarm, like if you read books, you probably have learned or have read that 50% of the bees with the old queen, they go out in a swarm, right? So that's probably what you have heard at this point. But then there was a study in 2012 by Tom Seeley and Juliana Rangel. They did an observation hive study where they have created their own swarm, right? They have this vertical frames in an observation hive, and they are creating a swarm there. And then they estimated how many bees were left after the swarm. So they say about 75% of the bees with the old queen go out in a swarm, right? And it could be variable, right? Depends on the size of the hive, what time of the year the swarm has happened. So there are other variables, but I was really surprised that 75% is too many bees out from your parental hive. So what we have been doing is we are doing another study with the European fall brood in blueberries. Commercial beekeepers have some issues. As Cheryl mentioned, EFB is a disease, early spring. By this time, it should be clearing off if you have one. So we wanted to see, so we caught some swarms. So you have to, if you want to be a part of this study, you have to know exactly which hive swarmed, and you are able to catch the swarm as well immediately. Immediately means in the sense after they land on a branch of a tree or somewhere else. So then you capture the swarm entirely with the queen, and then you put in a single story hive with 8 or 10 frames. And then I'll give you a protocol on how to estimate bees on the frames. And then you go back to the hive that has swarmed and also estimate the bee population there. So there is a protocol. I have put together some images for you to make your life easy. So yeah, if you see any swarm, I know I would expect some swarms coming in this week because it looks like again sunny, and I know the temperatures are going to be a little down again, but you may see a lot of swarms for the next couple of weeks. So if you, I don't know, Cheryl, did you get that email or instructions on that?
I did, and both of
Okay.
them, and I had two hives swarm, and I thought, man, if I'd gotten that email about 2 weeks earlier, I would have been more motivated to go out and catch them.
Yeah. No worries. I know I was late and I thought we would have enough data from here, but then I realized more the data, it's better. So we have about 4 hives that we already have data, and I'm not getting anywhere close to 75. The data I have collected is about 55% of bees are going out along with the queen. So I am still skeptical about 75% in that study. So hope if you are all able to provide me some good information, then yeah, I think so. It's more of a citizen science project at this time, but I don't want you to climb ladders and take a risk. I am asking you if it's very safe for you. If they just landed on a bush or next to your a bike or something that you have parked or something very convenient, then only try this thing. Or else, yeah, I don't want you to take any risk for this project. So, but once you have that, and again, I don't want you to be confused. Okay, I don't know. I have 10 hives, which one swarmed? That doesn't help either. I have to be, you have to be very sure which one swarmed, and then you catch the swarm, and then we estimate populations in both the swarm and your parental hive. So that would give me a lot of good data. Okay, that's one. And then quickly, the other study, we got some funding from USDA to, probably you heard my postdoc Priya talk about nutrition to your group maybe a few months ago. I don't remember when. So in that grant, we are looking at pollen nutrition. I know Glenn Anderson does a great job of giving you insights on what is blooming at different points of time during the bee season. And so maybe we'll bug him as well at some point in the study. So we want pollen collected from specific species, like just I'm throwing example, lavender, ceanothus, whatever is in bloom. If you can collect some pollen directly, I know all plant species don't provide you easy pollen. Like sunflower, I can bring in a couple of sunflower heads and put in a flower vase and then put some newspaper or something, and by morning there will be a lot of pollen that will be shed, and that's a easy manual collection. But some plant species, the florets are so small you can't. So in those we are relying on bees. So you have to follow a honey bee going on to at least 10-15 different flowers of the same species, and then you grab the bee with a net or with the vial. We'll give you protocols on that too. If you're interested, please email me. So that would give us more species. So we are planning on at least 100 plant species that are bee pollinated, or at least bees are attracted to those. Because at this point, if you go to Xerces website or NRCS, whatever, the recommendation for plants, and many of you probably are always wondering, right? What are the 10 best plants to plant for bees? That's a great question. But at this point, I don't think there is much science based on the nutritional composition of the pollen. Most of the recommendations are based on how attractive that is for bees, right? So always attractiveness doesn't always correlate with the pollen quality or the nectar quality of the species. So this is a big project which we are very ambitiously trying to finish in 3 years. So we may need some help there as well in collecting some pollen. So if you're interested, please email me and I'll give you more directions as well. Okay, I think I killed enough time on advertising here. let's get to the mites here. So before I even start, as usual, I acknowledge all the lab members that probably you have met several of them at some point at the meetings. So yeah, I lead the lab, but again, without all these incredible people, what we do at Oregon State University Honeybee Lab is not possible. So I'll quickly go over the life cycle for the sake of the new beekeepers here in the audience. So when we talk, and yeah, don't take this mite lightly. This has totally changed the face of the beekeeping industry since its arrival in the United States. Around, we think 1987 was the first detection, but it has totally changed. Yeah, talk to beekeepers that have kept bees before the introduction of varroa mite. Their life was a lot easier. Even they would ignore their hives for 2 or 3 months, nothing would happen. They're still alive. But you can't do that now. You have to monitor for varroa mites and do something. I know some of you hate to use any chemicals, but unfortunately, there is no option. You have to do something. It could be more softer chemicals you want to use, or I don't think just with the cultural methods you can keep this mite under control. So I know it's a challenge. As a bee researcher, I would not want to use chemicals, but unfortunately, that's not where we are. These mites are pretty devastating. They feed on the abdomen, feed on the abdominal fat bodies, and also some degree of hemolymph, and they transmit lethal viruses. So you have to take this mite seriously. So here I'm quickly gonna go over the life cycle of the mite. And you may say, why life cycle of a mite? The honeybee life cycle looks more interesting, right? Why should we talk about varroa life cycle? The whole goal for me here is if I can give you good sense, especially for the new beekeepers, if you know how the varroa mite life cycle is, especially these two phases, the reproductive phase and phoretic phase, it will help you with your treatments and when you monitor for them. I think this background is really useful. So bear with me for at least a couple of minutes on this life cycle. So there are two phases, a reproductive phase and a phoretic phase. So phoretic is the one where you see the mite on the bee, right? So they will feed on those bees on their abdominal fat bodies and some hemolymph as well. And then when the time comes for reproduction, the reproductive phase, they have to go into the cells. So they have to look for a larva, which is the right age. They don't go randomly into a day old or a 2 day old or a 3. They have to look for something more than 5 days old, closer to being capped. So, you know, when the final larval stage, after that, the bees will put a wax on top of the cell. So it gets capped, and then the larva turns into a pre-pupal stage, a pupal stage, and an adult. So from egg to a time when you see a bee coming out of her own cell takes about 21 days average, right? That's what you learned in your bee biology probably. So that's what I'm saying here. The female mite enters a cell 12 hours before capping. So once the larval food is eaten by the larva, the mite gets out and starts feeding on the larva inside that dark capped cell. So the first eggs are laid about 2.5 to 3 days later after they enter, and then after cell capping, sorry. And then subsequently every 30 hours, there will be another egg that is laid. And the first egg is a male, and then whatever she lays after that, second, third, fourth, fifth, she may lay about 5 to 8 eggs as well, and they become females. So there is this weird inbreeding happening there. So the brother that hatches will mate with all the females that become mature after some time. So that's what happens inside a cell. So these are the two phases that I said. Reproductive phase, you can't see them, right? Because they are inside these cells. So the new beekeepers here in the audience, so there might be mites hiding in those cells inside, because that's when the female mite entered to breed inside. And phoretic phase is this one I was referring to. You see the mites on the bees. So yeah, you need to acquaint yourself to the mites first, but they're not easy to see. They hide between the segments. And so, yeah, if you literally start seeing a lot of mites, then probably your mite levels are exploding already in those hives. So you don't want to get to that stage. You need to monitor, and I'll talk about monitoring of mites also in this presentation. So if you didn't understand anything that I said, just watch this animation. Hopefully this will give you a good sense of what I gave you, an overview of the mite life cycle. So here is a mite on a bee. She's dropping off and trying to get into a cell. where the larva is the right size larva. So they can smell the larva and tell what age group that is. They're pretty interesting individuals. So here you see now the cell has been capped. So the mite is laying eggs, those white things that you're seeing in the animation. So now the bee is also developing, right? It's almost getting to a cap stage. And so mites are not insects. So we use different terms for them like protonymph, deutonymph. So once the bee has chewed through the capping and comes out, so she has come out and you see there is a mom that entered and then there is a daughter that comes out along with her. So usually on average, there will be one daughter that comes out of a worker cell. But if this mite had an opportunity to get into a drone cell or drone larva, then probably there is a good chance she can make two babies as well. Because drones, if you remember, they take 3 more days to mature, right? So it's all about the time span the mite gets inside those cells. So for a drone cell, should expect two mites, two daughter mites, but for a worker cell, usually it's one. Yeah, and again, I want it to be interactive, so I know it might be a little annoying, but you can ask me via chat, or you can also unmute yourself if you have some pressing questions, but I'll make sure that I leave some time at the end for question answers as well. So you probably heard of parasitic mite syndrome. That's what we use when we talk about mites. You can see this bee has deformed wings. So there is a deformed wing virus, which is one of the lethal ones. There are different variants in that. If you read more recent literature, you'll see deformed wing virus A, deformed wing virus B, deformed wing virus C, and the B one is also called Varroa destructor virus 1. So there's a lot of confusing terms you'll use, but just for a new beekeeper, again, you don't want to get overwhelmed with that type of information. So just remember there is something called deformed wing virus, which is transmitted by these mites. So the mites are the carriers of the but there is horizontal and vertical transmission. That's a different story, but mites are the most responsible ones for this deformed wing virus. You'll see some uncapped cells. I'll show you a bigger image soon, but you can see here some of these cells where the bees are still developing have been opened up by the workers because they could find mites in them. So they want the mites to get out from those cells. If your bees have a little more hygienic behavior, or whatever people use, Varroa sensitive hygiene is another term. So then they will try to uncap some cells to remove the mites. So if you see a lot of bees with their heads out and they are still in a developmental stage, then probably that's another indication of high mite levels in your hive. So spotty brood pattern, like I think Cheryl showed you some good pictures of spotty brood as well. So spotty brood can be of several reasons, not just mite. So as you get more experience, you will know what a spotty brood pattern is and what might be causing it. So again, these are few symptoms of that can be put together and called parasitic mite syndrome. So this is a little blown up image. If you can see here, there are some bees that have been, cells of the bees have been opened, right? So you see some of these bees that are dead. There might be some pupal stages too. And one thing, again, this is a little more extreme, but if you take the frames that are where the bees have already declined, and if you tilt the frame to an angle, you should see the mite frass. This is the feces of the mites on the cell walls. So if you see some white crystalline, sometimes there might be some sugar that you have fed. Don't get confused with that. This is a little more distinct. So with experience, probably you will figure out it's a mite feces. So what you see in this cell. So, but you have to look at an angle. If you're just looking straight down, you may not be able to see those mite feces. If you see a lot of cells filled with that, then probably you have a high infestation rate in your hives of these mites. This is another image of the same mite feces you can see here. All the white stuff, crystalline white. And of course, I took this picture from a Bend beekeeper that sent me some diagnosis that he wanted to know if that was a mite kill. But you can see this is a sticky board that he has, or bottom board, where you can see a lot of mites here. So if you see on the bottom board, a lot of mites like that, probably you had a high level of mites, and that might have been a reason for your colony loss. This is another image. I know this is more of a yellow board, so you can't see well, but you can see those mites there. These are the mites. So, okay. that's an introduction to mites, but I'll go into a couple of studies as well, so that it gives you some basic understanding of mites as well. So we did this, I know, bear with me if you have seen these slides before, because I probably gave this talk at the OSBA as well. Not the entire talk, but this one. So the Varroa population dynamics. So have you ever wondered, especially when this question is for the veterans here too, who have a lot of experience with bees or experts. So if you read books again, there is a lot of information about the reproductive and phoretic phase. So how many mites, again, you don't have, if you are enthusiastic, you can type in the chat. How many mites you think are in, so let me put it more specific. So now it's June 2nd, right? So how many mites you think are hiding inside the cells in that breeding phase? And then how many mites you think are on the bees, like a percentage? Is it 50-50, 50-80, something like that? Like I put some numbers here for you to give some thought. This is important. It's not just for fun. I'm putting this in. It's a very laborious work that we did for the past few years. Not just one experiment. You know, we do a lot of studies. Probably 7-8 projects are always going on each year. But this was one which took us 3 years to totally finish the data. But so just keep thinking about this, because this is important. Because the reason why I show you this is when you use a mite treatment, if it's an oxalic acid, you know how long it works, right? So you have to keep thinking about how many mites are inside the cells. So every day, suppose your queen is laying 2,000 eggs today, every day. So there are 2,000 new bees that are coming out each day, right, in your hives. And then some of them may have mites inside. So that's what we are worried about. If you're using a mite treatment, which kills only mites for the 1 day or 2 day period that you have put, then what happens to the mites that come later after that, right? So that's what you have to think as a new beekeeper. That helps you more think about your treatments that you're going to use for Varroa, because and as a new beekeeper, you may just get some information on a miticide, you use it, and you think you're done for the year with mites. That's not how it works. So you have to be very vigilant, monitoring, and use the right treatment at the right time as well. Okay, let me see. Did anyone type in the chat? Let me see. Okay, there is a question. Let me answer that as well. If the mom mite only leaves with 1 or 2 daughter mites, what happens to the other mites that were laid in the cell? Yeah, good question. So I think Patty is wondering what happens to the other mites, because I said the queen probably lays 5 to 8 female eggs as well. So most of them, they die, because once they are not able to mate, and they don't get sclerotized as well. Sclerotized means they don't get the chitin on their body. So they're very vulnerable to any temperatures, or just as soon as the cell is open, when the worker comes out, that itself is a big stress for them. So they don't survive. So most of them, so short answer is they will all die. The ones that were not able to mate and successfully complete their life cycle, they all die. So it's only one that gets mated and is able to get the sclerotized chitin on top of the bodies. Okay, so it looks like there is an answer D and C. Okay. Yeah, okay, we'll see. I think there are interesting answers here. So what we did is, so this was objectives. As I said, we wanted to know how many mites are inside the cells, how many are on the bees in September. So this was a brief description of the methods here. So we used 6 colonies. We could have used more, but it's a destructive sampling. We had to kill all these hives. So we didn't want to kill too many, but we still wanted a decent sample size for the statistics, as well as to get some reliable data. So what we did is from March 22nd until September 14th. So this was done in 2018. So we didn't treat for mites. So these 6 colonies, they never got a mite treatment from March 22nd until September 14th. So we allowed them to grow as they will. Like Cheryl showed you this graph, how the mite population increases in parallel with the bee population. So we just wanted them to just grow as they can. And then we started monitoring the mite levels throughout the summer. But what happened? This is the main step. On September 14th, we go and then we kill all the 6 hives. So killing means not like burning or anything. So what we need those adult bees, right? So what we do is we collect all the adult bees into alcohol. So we found a day when the temperatures were not that high early in the morning. I think we were there by 6:30 in the morning to collect all those bees from the 6 hives. And then all the brood frames we had to collect to look into the cells to see how many mites were there in each of those cells. So it's pretty daunting task to do. But again, someone has to do this, right? There's not much information available on these aspects. So we had to do it. I couldn't find a better way to do this. So this was a laborious way, but still gives you good data. So this is what happening here. So you see the lab members here, they are shaking bees into the funnel. It goes into this bucket with alcohol and all the bees die here. So these buckets full of bees will go to the lab and then we will estimate the number of mites on those bees. And then all the brood also goes into a freezer. And then and then the students, whenever they have time, they will poke into each of those cells and look for mites. So this is a video. Hope it's playing okay on your side. Cheryl, is the video too slow or is it playing okay?
It looks really good.
Okay. Yeah, while sharing, I didn't choose the option of optimize video or whatever. They have an option there, but I didn't. So yeah, it's a little messy. Probably we lose 5-10% bees maybe in this, but I'm pretty sure we got about 90% of all the population that we wanted. So all these buckets of bees come back to the lab and we estimated that was not the tough job, but this was the more daunting task where the students had to wear those visors with the magnifying glass and with lights and look into each cell and then look for the entire mite population inside with the family as well. So we have stored them in vials. And so, yeah, so none of these students has sued me at this point for loss of sight. So it looks like it went okay. So again, another image of how these mites are inside those cells along with the brood. This is another image of one family that we found in one cell. You can see these two are getting sclerotized. So this is what that question goes back to. Some of them that are not able to get sclerotized, they will just die when the mite comes out, when the bee comes out of the cell. So this is what I mean, sclerotization or the chitin, because these are very soft bodied, right? They can't survive. So this is another image of this bee with the mite. So we pull the entire developing bee outside and you can see the mite population inside, the mite family. So this is just one family here. Okay, so what did we find? So these are the final numbers we had from the 6 hives, average of the 6 hives. So about 44% are on the bees and about 56% are on. Again, this may vary depending on the time of the year. So this is in the valley. If you live in the valley and in September you were looking, probably this information is very relevant to you. But it could vary depending on how big the hive was at that point, how much your queen was laying. So there are a lot of variables, but this gives you a good sense on what percentage of mites are. So it could be more at some point of time. It may even go to 70% in some cases too. So again, long story short here, and the basic information I want to provide you is more than 50% mites are in the cap brood cells during brood rearing season for sure. Even it might be more than 50 as well, depending on the time of the year. So you have to think about those guys too, not just the ones that are on the bees. So if you get rid of with a oxalic vapor, maybe you get rid of mites that are on the bees for that day or two, then what happens to the mites that are still coming after that, right? So you still have to use another treatment probably later, or use something else as well to get rid of your mites. That's what I want you to learn from this slide. So that's what I say here. Keep this fact in mind when using mite treatments to control varroa. And then also, please, I'll go into this alcohol wash and sugar shake a little bit in the next few slides. but you have to monitor as well, right? Without monitoring, you can't just blindly go and just assume there are mites or assume there are no mites. So you have to do some testing. And I can't emphasize overemphasize the importance this. It is very important for you to monitor mites, especially in the brood rearing season, and especially now on until at least I would say from July on, it's very critical to keep your mite levels low. So there are several mite monitoring methods. So if you, again, I'll probably send the PowerPoint PDF slides to Cheryl at some point, but, or you can just Google for Oregon State University Honeybee Lab, how to monitor Varroa, and you'll find a couple of videos, and this is the link for that. So Carolyn and Ellen have produced a video to show you how to use alcohol wash and sugar shake to assess your mite populations in your hive. So you probably heard of Easy Shake, and there is a sugar shake as well, which some people like because you are not killing the bees. You're using powdered sugar, and then you shake the bees and then shake the mites out and then release those bees back into the hive. Which is okay, but this is the most reliable method, I would say. The alcohol wash, even though you're killing 200 or 300 bees for this alcohol wash testing, but you get the percentage of mites pretty close to what you may have in your hive. So there is another way to do sticky boards. This is the most easiest one, and but it's not that reliable because you're getting a lot of mites here in the debris. You probably count, but it doesn't really provide you. It provides you some sense that you have mites in your hive, but it doesn't provide you any percentage of mites that you're looking for to take an action or not to take any action at that point of time. So that's important as well. So then if you read books and have looked at some other literature, we talk about thresholds, right? There are treatment thresholds. And then probably some websites talk about how to sample for varroa mites. And so I wanted to spend a little time on this because if I just tell you that, yeah, you have to sample and look for mites, and if you're not doing the right way, I don't think that data is useful either. So that's the reason why I'm spending some time here to make you understand, especially, again, bear with me, the experienced beekeepers, probably I'm preaching to the choir, but for the new beekeepers, this is important. So if you read any of those varroa informations in bee books or literature or whatever, the bee culture magazines, wherever you get your information, so this is the number that probably is floated around, right? 2 to 3%. That means 2 mites per 100 bees or 3 mites per 100 bees is a widely used threshold level by many beekeepers. So I'm not arguing that this has come from some data that was collected in Canada, but this could vary based on the region as well. You can easily say this may not be true for Georgia or some other states in the east or the south. So thresholds also vary with time of the year too, right? So if you're looking for thresholds now, so 2 to 3% may be a good one now, because can you think why 2 to 3%? And so let me make a statement here, and let's see if you have a good answer for that. So my argument would be 2 to 3% in June, July is still a bad number. And then I will say 5 to 6% is still a good number in fall. Why would that be? I'm making sure none of you are sleeping. That's why I'm asking questions. Okay, there is a question. Let me read that first. So David is asking, there is one more before that. So the first question here is, been sick for a few weeks, couldn't manage hives, had a swarm, looking for upcoming broodless opportunity in original hive to treat with oxalic acid vapor. Am I correct? Planning this for 14 to 18 days after the swarm. Okay, bear with me. I'll talk about oxalic acid. I have several slides on oxalic for a I'll answer that question at that time. So I'm a new beekeeper, no hive started yet. Are these mites so prolific that a newly started hive is bound to get mites by virtue of the first bees introduced into the hive carrying mites in? If not, how is that they eventually introduce in a hive apiary? What is the mechanism for introduction of mites? Okay. So mites, if you have purchased a package, and usually package bees, I think the suppliers do a good job of not having too many mites. But if you have purchased a nuke or nucleus hive already established, they are also supposed to be doing something in spring before they sell you. But yeah, mites can be there already, even if it's a package or a nucleus hive. It depends on what is your source and what is their mite treatment protocol. If they have already controlled mites, then you are dealing with minimal mites at that point. But if there was no mite treatment done, then you have to be careful and keep watching what's going on in June and July by looking at the mite levels, either with alcohol wash or with the sugar shake, whatever you prefer. So mites can be introduced even if you have minimal numbers, and if you have a weak hive next to you, it dies, then the bees will start robbing. The strong hive will go into, not the entire bees, but some population will go and rob your weak hive that has too many mites. And that's how, because mites can't fly, right? They don't have wings, but the bees can go into another hive, and those mites can latch on to those bees that are coming back to the other hive. So there could be a lot of mite transmission that happens as well. Okay, so 3% is not good because it suggests that when mite should be so high, they are 5% in August, suggests that there are fewer bees or relative mite. Yeah, that's a good answer. So, what here, I think it's Cheryl who was answering. So, what she means is, so you have to think about the brood, right? Because I said many more mites are there, maybe 50, 60, 70% mites are already in the cells, right? So that's why even if you get 2 to 3%, you should be worried because there are so many mites still hiding in the cells. But if it comes to August or September, what happens? There is less brood, right? There is less cells for these mites to breed and hide. So most of the mites are at that point on the bees. So even if your numbers are a little high, like 5% or 6, you should be still okay. But if you're looking in June, July, and part of August, and your numbers are like 7, 8, then you should be worried because that many, or at least twice that number, are still inside those cells as well. So that's what I wanted to make sure that you understand. These thresholds are not always reliable. Don't just stick to this number throughout the year. It could vary. So if 2 to 3% is an acceptable number that people have come up with for several years, I'm not a big fan of numbers, but again, because I don't have my own data, so I can't argue much, but 2 to 3% is something. But there are commercial beekeepers, you talk to them, they will joke. They'll say, I mean, they're serious. They say in a joking way, but they say even one mite, not percentage I'm talking about, even one mite is a threshold for them. They will go and do something about it. So, but I know commercial beekeeping is very different. That's their bread and butter. They have to be more careful about mites than a backyard beekeeper. But still, so the mite thresholds are not always reliable. That's what I'm trying to make a point. You have to use some numbers. So this is a good number to look at. But thresholds are not always reliable. So don't think you have to just stick to this number throughout the year and you think you're okay. And the other question is where to sample and which frames. You probably heard Randy Oliver and other speakers in the past probably give you some tips where to sample or which frames to sample. This is again a very gray area. We don't have very good information, but just logically speaking, you should be taking B samples for the mite testing from the brood area, right? So be careful. Don't sample your queen. Then you create a disaster. So you have to double check for the queen and then take sample from that frame of 300 or 200 bees, whatever your protocol is. So I think Randy, if I remember one of his talks, he was saying that he looks for the frame next to the brood frame. Probably he has some data, but I haven't seen anything published or something, so I can't really speak to that at this point. Maybe that's a good protocol. But yeah, you can't randomly go into a honey super or somewhere from the top. You can't take a sample, and that may not be reliable because the thresholds itself are challenging. And if you are taking at the wrong place your sample, then probably that's not going to reflect the exact situation in a hive. So you need to be very careful about that aspect as well. Okay, any questions? Let me see. So Kevin is asking how long of a brood break is necessary to have an impact on mite populations if not using other treatments in combo with the brood break. So I need more information here. So do you mean by giving a brood break, you just don't want to use any chemical treatment here, or is it just giving a brood break? And so yeah, is it some treatment? If you give me more information, then I can answer this one. Yeah, with only brood break, but you still have to get the mites out, right? So when you give a brood break, what happens is all the mites are on the bees now, right? So then you have to use a treatment. So that's a good strategy if you want to give a brood break. It doesn't work for commercial beekeepers. They can't do this with their thousands of hives they have. But yeah, you have the luxury, or it's more practical for a backyard beekeeper because you can meticulously watch and make sure that the queen is doing still okay during the brood break, and you will meticulously remove the cage or wherever you caged her. And so yeah, brood break has its value, but you have to use a treatment to get all the mites out, right, from the all the phoretic mites now on the bees. So if you don't do anything, you are just giving them a break, but those mites will again go back into the cells of those larvae whenever they become available. So brood break along with the treatment is the best option you have. So the other question Ted is asking is, if you have a double deep hive, where do you take your sample for alcohol test? So again, whatever your configuration of the hive is, if you have a double deep and you still see brood on the top, then yeah, wherever the brood is, brood, when I say brood, I'm looking for capped and a little bit open as well. Don't go into a totally a capped brood as well. So the ideal frame would be the frame that has some cells capped, or even if it's open, that's fine too, because that's where the nurse bees will be. And most of the mites are looking for an opportunity to get into those right cells, right? Where the larvae are 4 day, 5 day or 5.5 day old, where they want to get in. So that's where you will have a better opportunity to find mites. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a double deep or a single, as long as you can find some brood, take sample from that area. Cheryl asking 70% isopropyl regular rubbing. Were you answering question? Okay, that's good. Yeah, you're saving me some time here. That's a good question. Alec is asking, how long does one mite live for, right? Yeah, it's $1 million question. So what happens is it depends on the time of the year. So now the mites are so busy breeding, right? They're not taking a major break anywhere. So usually the literature is not there. Too much work has not been done on this is a painful process, right? If I want to watch a mite, what's happening, I have to paint a mite and then see where it goes. And then I have to see when it comes back and then reinfest. So it's not an easy one. That's why people have not studied mites that carefully, but there are a couple of studies. So based on that, I can answer your question. So the mites have so they are working so hard now in terms of breeding, right? So they're going into the cells, and also so during a peak season when the larva is available and the mites are breeding intensely, they are probably surviving about 40 days. But think about the mites that are there on the bees in October, right? There is not much brood and they're all on the bees now in November. So those mites will survive even until March, until they get an opportunity to get into the cell. So they're surviving 4 or 5 months as well in some states. So it depends on what time of the year you're looking. So if you're looking in the peak season of brood rearing, they're probably surviving about 40 days, but probably months in later stages during the late fall time. I think both questions were related. What is mite's lifespan? I answered there. And then I used vodka during the pandemic. Worked great. All the alcohol was sold out. Okay, that's some good tip here for the beekeepers. Okay, I'll go back to the slides now. So I know there are so many ways, and you're in good hands with your Portland Urban Group. It's one of the impressive groups in Oregon. And so you probably will learn a lot being associated with your Portland Urban Beekeepers Association. So I'll show you what we do in the lab. So this gives you a good sense on why alcohol wash is a little more reliable than other methods. Sugar shake is pretty close too. So you can keep using sugar shake if you don't want to kill bees. But this is what we do in the lab when you send a sample or we collect samples for our research. This is how we do. So here is Sarah who is demonstrating. So these are the bees that we collected in the vials. So these are the ones in alcohol. So she's transferring them into these bigger jars here because they have to go onto a shaker. So shaking is critical as well. And some beekeepers may just do few seconds and no, that's not good. At least I would say shake for 2 minutes and then leave it alone for another minute. And then you look for your mites and alcohol wash because you have to really dislodge those mites from the bees. So now she has put them in there, and you see there is a mesh here, like a wire mesh, like a conical thing, so that the bees stay there and the mites will go onto the bottom. So this is a shaker. So I think she's gonna shake them at 250 revolutions per minute. Yeah, you don't have to buy this. This is expensive. I'm just showing you what we do in the lab. If you're able to shake with your hand, that's great. So that's 250 RPM. And then Claire is demonstrating here so that after the shaking, we take the bees off that are there in that mesh here. And then she is pouring all the liquid that is left with the mites on through a sieve. You see that sieve there? So all the mites are here on the sieve now. She's making sure everything is off from the jar. And now you'll see she puts all the mites onto this container. So she's putting alcohol there again to get them into this container. And if you have a white background, you can easily see the mites now. See all those mites? Now she's gonna count them. So use a pipette and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's easy to suck them up and count at the same time. So that's basically what we do as a mite analysis using alcohol wash in the lab. I know it's a little more systematic, time consuming, but that gives us a good sense of what's going on in a hive. Okay, I'll stop the video and go to the next slide. So here I'm giving you some options. I'll not go in length on all of these. Again, as I said, you're in good hands with your group and you can ask more questions and they will answer, the experienced beekeepers in your group. So these are some current treatments that are there for mites. So the first one is the most widely used APVAR. It's Amitraz is the active ingredients. It's 3.33% Amitraz. There is a Mitaway quick strips, which probably they are not selling that anymore, I guess, or maybe there are still some old stocks, but this is the formulation that is available. Both are formic acid. Formic Pro, they are this pads they sell, or strips, whatever you want to call them. APGuard is a thymol product, which is also a good one. HobGuard, we haven't done much research except for when the very early formulation came like 7-8 years ago. It was a little more messy, but looks like they have changed their formulation a little bit more. It's not as drippy and messy now, but HobGuard, I am always concerned, like I think you have to use it at least 2 or 3 times minimum to get a good control, but I think the label doesn't tell you all that information. So again, HobGuard, if you're using, be careful, you have to use multiple times. I don't think one treatment of HobGuard does the job. Oxalic, I'll spend more time, so I'll not talk oxalic right now, but I have few studies that I'll show you, and then I'll answer some questions on oxalic acid. This is becoming more popular after it got the official registration a few years ago, both as a dribble method as well as for vaporization or sublimation, whatever term you want to use here. So APVAR, again, so this is a little more slow product, I would say, if you're using in fall. So I would recommend this product to be used in spring because you have less mite load, and then that might be good enough to get the mite levels down. But in fall, when you have too many mites, maybe it takes time. So you have to be careful on when you want to use. But again, this is recommended for any time of the year you can use this, except for when you're having honey production going on. That means you have supers on, then you have to remove this. Formic acid is a very impressive product, but again, it has its own disadvantages, is that it kills some brood for sure. So you don't want to use late in the season. If you use Formic in August, September, I would not recommend because you're killing a bunch of brood, and that might not be helpful for your hive because yeah, I'm very passionate about bee nutrition. I have slides at the end, but I'll not talk because of time. But I think Priya might have talked about nutrition as well in the past. I'll not spend time there, but nutrition and varroa, these are the two important ones, to the key for your success as a beekeeper. I know some years we do everything right, but we are still not successful. But I think your success rate will increase as a new beekeeper if you manage varroa mites and you keep tab on the nutrition of the hive. When I say nutrition, both honey in the hive as well as the protein levels, that means pollen, both are important for the hive. So what happens, your bees that are raised in September, October, technically in the valley, I would qualify them or classify them as diutinous bees or winter bees. Probably you heard that term before. So winter bees are not some magical bees. They look the same like your bees right now, but their physiology is different because now there is less larva to feed in August, September. So the bees, the nurse bees are still there. So they're still eating the protein, the pollen, and they're transferring everything into their bodies. So they are increasing their fat bodies by eating the pollen, but they're not feeding that much larva. So they're storing everything. So their physiology is very different. They can survive longer. That's why the winter bees will survive 4 or 5 months of winter, whereas your summer bees, they don't store anything in their bodies. They are very selfless. They are eating and then providing that to the larva by growing their hypopharyngeal glands and mandibular glands, the brood food producing glands. So they eat the pollen, grow those glands, and continuously feed those larvae. So they're not storing anything in their bodies for their own purposes. Whereas the bees that are raised in September, October, they are storing more on their bodies. They're not feeding that much larva because the larva is not there. The queen has slowed down, right? So that's a difference in physiology between a summer bee and a winter bee. So you don't want those winter bees to be compromised. So when you're using formic acid and killing some brood in September or October, your bees don't have the chance, right? Like Cheryl was saying, if you catch a swarm late in August, then they don't have a chance of much success because they still have to procure all the food reserves, and then they have to still keep laying eggs to increase their population, because population is critical. There is a threshold. You don't, your hives with 4-frame, 3-frame bees will not survive, right? You need at least solid 15 frames of bees to successfully go through the winter. So those are critical things you have to think. So Formic is a very good product, but I would suggest to use earlier than later. And you may say, it's too hot in July, and how can, so that's a trick. So you have to see when do you have a weather, because these are all temperature dependent. This one, they're both very temperature dependent. So if you are putting Formic when it's a 95-degree day, that's not recommended. Neither the label will say either, right? The label will say you have to use below 90 as far as I understand this product. So read the label. So if it's too hot, then you're creating a lot of disaster inside. And the nice thing about Formic now is they have two options. So you can use one pad for 10 days, or you can use 2 pads for whatever 14 days, I believe. So read the label again. I may be misquoting some things here because I can't remember all the labels. Label is the law. So you have to read the label before you use any of these products. So Formic, at least one pad is not as toxic because the fumes are low, and probably your bees will take it, and the brood damage will be less as well when compared to using 2 strips at the same time. So, but be careful about the temperatures. And if you find some sweet spot from now on until maybe end of July, I think that would be a best option. But yeah, if temperatures are high, even early August is still okay, but don't kill your brood in September or late August by using Formic Pro. Maybe then your queen doesn't have much opportunity to lay, and you will end up going into the winter with a small cluster, which is not ideal to survive the winter. ApiGuard is a nice product, thymol. This can be used, again, it's temperature sensitive, can create some disturbance in the hive, but it doesn't create that much brood damage when compared to Formic Pro. Okay, I will go to Oxalic now. So oxalic, probably many of you heard there is a label change happening. So oxalic was not legally allowed to use when you had honey supers on, but now the new label, I believe it is gonna come soon. I don't think it is there at this point. So right now the label says oxalic acid cannot be applied when honey supers are on. So the new change will allow oxalic acid to be used year round because FDA has exempted the tolerance. I mean, the tolerance exemption for oxalic acid has been given by FDA. So now EPA doesn't require you to follow those tolerance limits. So, so it's called an oxalic acid dihydrate. That's a registration if you're interested. So this is the only company that is allowed to sell. And I know some beekeepers are mad. Why can't I just buy from a hardware store the bleach and use? But unfortunately, there are rules that EPA follows, and this is the only registered product that EPA allows for you to officially use or legally use in the hives. It's called the AP Bioxol. Thing Man Lake and all other stores probably sell this as well. So if you need more information, go to this website on what is this new change all about. It's a USDA website. So I copied some language from their FAQ section. It says in the near future, current label of oxalic acid used in bee colonies to control varroa mites will be amended to allow for the application of oxalic acid year round. That's what I said, including when honey supers are in place. So if again, there is a trick. If it's still an old label, they're not allowing you to use those. It's it's tricky, but it has to have a new label on it, I guess. So it says use of oxalic acid that does not adhere to what is specified on the label, or use of an unregistered source of oxalic acid is considered an off-label use and is subjected to EPA enforcement. This FIFRA thing. So current methods are solution method is allowed, spraying packaged bees, and using a vaporizer. So this is how it looks like. The AP Bioxol registered in 2015. So the mode of action is still not known, right? You'll be surprised. Many compounds that I mentioned before, for maybe 80-90% of them, we don't know how they work on mites. Especially the only the mode of action for the synthetic ones like APOR. It works on the nervous system of the insect. I mean, in our case, it's mites, not insects. So yeah, it's another black hole where we don't know much about the mode of action of many of these compounds we have. So I'll go into the first study because there is so much interest in oxalic, and there are concerns as well among beekeepers and the scientific community that oxalic vapors might be damaging for the larva, right? So in this first study, we wanted to see, does oxalic acid at the recommended dose kill any eggs, larvae in the hive? So here you see Carolyn with all the protective equipment. Again, I will not recommend you use oxalic without all the equipment. Oxalic vapors are very toxic. And I know some of you may say, oh, I can just do quickly. The wind is blowing that side, so I may be okay. I would not recommend any of that. Please use protective equipment like this, because your health is more important to your bees. I know I appreciate bees, but your health is more important than your bee health. So please be careful when you use oxalic acid vapors. So this is how we put it in. This is the device that we used. Probably you're using something a little different, but again, same concept. But the only new thing I'm gonna recommend here is, you see there is a spacer here. When I say spacer, means it's like a 2-inch high space that we are creating here between this lower box, so that I'm not gonna burn the frames. So I have seen some beekeepers creating some destruction in the hive by putting this hot thing. It's very hot when it goes in, right? And it may burn some of your frames if they're touching this thing. So please use a spacer. And the other advantage is, by using a spacer, you're uniformly distributing the fumes inside the hive as well. Because if that frame is stuck on here, then probably your material is not heating up either. So yeah, please use a spacer if you want. So Cheryl mentioned the Oregon Master Beekeeper Program. We started that, I think I came to OSU 2009. So we initiated that program in 2011, which is one of very successful programs in the country now with the mentor-mentee relationship. So here you see We provide some opportunity for the master level Oregon Master Beekeeper students to participate in our research as well. Like the examples I mentioned earlier, you can be a part of a swarm study or the pollen nutrition study as well. So here are beekeepers that are helping us look at some of the larval mortality using this acetate sheet. So what we do is we select 50 larvae of each age group here, like 2-day and 4-day. Think you can see well here. You see those dots here? So we attach this acetate sheet or a transparent paper on top, and then we are able to see through which larva we are looking at, and we put a dot, and then we come next day and next day. So we monitor them for until they are capped to see if the larva is dead or the bees have removed them. So that's how we monitor for larval mortality. So here are the results. I'll quickly go through because of time here, but I can answer questions if you have. So here you see after 24 hours, we are looking at, this is formic. The yellow one is formic acid. The dark bar here is oxalic, and the purple one you see is control. That means no treatment. So you see formic, about 30% plus eggs are lost. If you look at 48-hour data, so this is all cumulative, right? So 48 hours, you see about 70% eggs gone and 90% almost in 1 week. Whereas the oxalic and controls were not very different from each other. They were not significantly different. So we looked at the 2-day-old larva, which I'm saying they are young larva. So you can see the formic acid is not as bad as the eggs, but still you lose about 75% young larva as well with formic, but there is no difference between, or significant difference between oxalic and controls. This is the 5-day-old larva we looked at. So it looks like, so this bar is different, right? So these are only smaller percentages on the y-axis. So you see after a week, about 25% older larvae are gone. So it looks like older larvae are more resistant, or at least tolerant to the fumes. And there was no significant difference between oxalic and controls here. So take home message, oxalic acid vaporization at the recommended dose, which is 1 gram per box, right? That's a recommendation right now. Appears to be safe to the brood. But formic, as I said, has negative impact on the brood. But again, don't get me wrong, formic is one of the impressive products that kills mites even inside the cells. That's the only product that will kill male mites and female mites inside the cells. But you have to use it at the right time. That's a caveat with formic. So that you do some minimal damage to your brood. But if you're doing early and you lose some brood, it's worth, because now your mite levels are so low. So whatever the queen is gonna lay, those bees will be mite free at least to some degree, and they will be successful in wintering as well, or overwintering phase. So we were worried about the dose because some beekeepers with 1 gram, they were not getting any good control. So what we did, this was 2019, is look at efficacy of oxalic acid vapors. We did 3 applications of oxalic acid, and we use different doses. So this is a regular dose. So 2 grams for 2 boxes. So the regular dose is 1 gram per box, right? So we are using 2-story hives. That's why it's 2 grams. So we had 8 hives for that treatment. And these are the dates. 8 colonies with 4 grams. This is not the legal dose, but as a researcher, I am allowed to use doses that I want to test for sure. So we use that higher dose to see if that gives you a better efficacy. And there are 8 colonies that got formic acid pro, one pad twice, right? 16th and 31st. And then other 8 colonies didn't get any treatment. So that's, we call them controls here. So that's how you have 32 colonies here for the experiment. So we looked at varroa mite infestation, number of frames of bees, because we were worried formic will kill bees. So we wanted to see what kind of damage that does, and does oxalic does any damage, even though we know we didn't see much in the first study, any damage to larvae. I mean, there was some, but not significant. So we looked at bees, brood area, and this part we haven't finished yet. It takes a long time to do these kind of things. So we are looking at some oxidative stress in the bees that are subjected to oxalic and all these other treatments. And there is another hypothesis that oxalic will damage the mouth parts of the bees or their appendages, the legs. So we wanted to see those effects as well. But we have collected the bees, but we haven't gone that far into the analysis yet. So I'll just show you what we found with the mite efficacy. So here you can see this is post-treatment. This is before treatment, right? So this is a baseline for controls. So because we didn't use any mite treatment in control, so you should expect them to go up. So you see from whatever 3.5% to almost 11% increase. Formic, you see there is only a little marginal. These are not significantly different. And you should see an increase, right? Because this is the time when the mite populations are still going up. So you will not get this down, but at least it's not very different from the initial population. So that's a good news for Formic. And we knew Formic is gonna work very well for mite treatment. 4-gram oxalic is also pretty similar to this, right? They didn't go, this is not significantly different between post and pre, which is a good news as well. It's not going up with like control here. 2-gram, not that effective, but still better than the control for sure. So this is your regular dose that is that we used, the 1 gram per box. So you see there is a significant difference between this baseline and the final post-treatment. So there is an increase in mite levels for sure there. So here, I'm just showing you in another way the same slide that I showed you before, just showing you a percentage increase. You see, then control, it went that much, Formic not much, oxalic 2 grams, same slide in a different slide. So frames of brood. So we were interested in if the brood is being impacted by those treatments. So control, we didn't see much of a significant difference, but brood was low a little bit. Formic, you see a difference. Again, we knew this fact. The brood will be decreased because the formic can damage larvae. So that's why you're seeing a significant difference between pre-treatment and post-treatment here. 4-gram oxalic, there is a little bit, but not significantly different. 2-gram is also similar trend here. So I'm showing you the same graph on looking at a different way, the same results, showing you how many number of frames are less. So frames of brood in control, only 0.5 less, but Formic, you lost about 2 frames of brood. In 4-gram oxalic, you lost about 0.75 frame, 2 grams, same as control. This might be interesting to several of you here. So you see, we wanted to look at, I wish we had done it for 10 days, and that's what we want to do this year. We are repeating not the exact protocol, but with oxalic, we'll be doing some more dose testing with a higher dose again. So control, you see, control, if new beekeepers might be wondering why wouldn't control the mites drop? There is always a natural drop. Bees are grooming themselves and the mites may fall, or mites are trying to get into other cells and accidentally they slip and fall. So there will be a natural drop as well on the sticky board. So these are control numbers. So Formic Pro, we didn't see much on the day 1, but then you see day 2, there was a huge drop here, almost 4 times the first day. And then it dropped a little bit to 92. Oxalic high dose, which is about 2 grams per box, 48 mites on day 1. Then this is a good drop as well here, day 2. And then it goes down. So we don't know what happens after this. I'm assuming it keeps going down. So it looks like oxalic works for at least a few days. It's not just 1 day treatment. So oxalic low, also similar trend, but not as effective as your high level of oxalic. So these are still pending, the oxidative stress and this part. So hopefully when I speak to your group again sometime later, then I will be able to give you more information then. So you may have still some unanswered questions about oxalic, right? So how many applications of oxalic vapor is safe and effective? I get this question all the time. And then how does oxalic acid kill mites? As I said, mode of action is still not known. So these are some things which probably will be still looking at in the future. So I think this is my last slide. So I'll give you some important tips on varroa control that I summarize here. And after that, if you have still patience to stick around, I'll take questions, or else we can call it a day. So you have to monitor mite levels frequently, monitor mite levels. This is important. I don't know how many of you do this. Before and after is critical, right? So if I'm using oxalic, whatever my regimen is 3 times every week, a week apart 3 times, then I want to know what my initial levels were there and after 3 weeks, what my levels are, right? Because if you don't do this, you don't know whether your treatment is working. And if you just believe that it's working, and after a month and a half you go and do again, your mite levels might have exploded and the damage is already done. So both varroa control, nutrition, those are the key in late fall and fall that will keep your bees at least in a more healthy uh, environment so that they'll thrive the winter. So even a 2-week delay in applying mite treatments can cause. So mites are, as I said, really, really serious. And I have seen a beekeeper with 10,000 hives, commercial beekeepers. They can't treat all 10,000 in same day or week. So if they are even 2 weeks delayed, I have seen one apiary that was treated on probably August 1st, and then one is treated on August 16th, you will see a significant difference between their survival, because a 2 weeks period is enough for the mites to do a significant damage to your bees. So treat all colonies. I know some of you may disagree with me that why should I treat all colonies in my apiary? When I say if you have 5 hives, I want you to treat all if you think there are mites in 1 or 2, because they can easily transmit, right? We talked about robbing and drifting behavior of bees, so they can easily get infested with mites sooner. So it would be a nice thing to treat all colonies in an apiary if you think mite levels are high. And as I said before, Amitraz or APR, it's more effective if you use in spring rather than fall. But fall, again, I'm not discouraging you. If you think mite levels are okay, they're not like exploding, then even fall treatment with Amitraz is fine. I think I will stop here. And this is a website. I think even Dr. Karen is involved with this Honeybee Health Coalition. This is a nice website where you have all the information on how to use treatments, the ones I talked about. And there's a lot of good videos to watch as well. So as a new beekeeper, I think you will really get a lot of good information from this website. I think that was my last slide. I don't want to talk about nutrition because you have to be here until midnight if I go there. So I'll stop here and take questions. Cheryl, yeah, I don't know what you want to do, but I think it's 8:30 now.
Okay, well, we have a couple of questions. So we had one person who wanted to know if there was a residue or taste that's imparted to the honey from OA, but since we haven't been using it with honey supers on, I don't think anybody would really know that yet. And then somebody wanted to know if OA would be the best treatment option for a top bar hive. And so I don't know, Andrea, if you mean OA vapor or OA drip. If you have a screen bottom board, you can, on your top bar, you can use the OAV. Otherwise, it might be a little tricky. And the one thing I would worry about with the top bar is that you don't have anything protecting the wax from coming into contact with your very, very, very hot thing that you're putting your OAV on, which could lead to a flash explosion. So you have to be aware of the flash point of wax, which is a bad thing. So that spacer that Dr. Sagili was talking about that's why that's so important. Using it with the Langstroth is it also keeps you from setting your hive on fire. And then Dr. Sagili, I'll let you answer Bruce's question. He says, I understand that Formic Pro can be used with the honey supers on the hive. If so, how many supers can there be on a 2 brood chamber hive and still use the Formic Pro? And what method do you recommend? Just the 2 strips or 1 strip?
Yeah, no, great question. So supers are not a concern. I would say look for your brood area. How much is there? If you have 2 boxes and then honey supers on, so I think the recommendation is 2 strips per brood chamber, right? For the 14-day treatment. So I would still recommend the 1 pad treatment for 10 days. I think many commercial beekeepers are also using it, and we have not done any work on that aspect, but I have enough experience listening to beekeepers. The commercial beekeepers, they feel 1 pad doesn't do much damage to the brood, and it still gives you, it may not be as effective as 2 pads at the same time, but if you're using 10 days apart, a single pad twice, then I think that's a good treatment. I think that would be the most recommended one.
And then Leor Holtzman asks, or says that Medhat Nazar mentioned that the recommended dosage for OAV is too low as it breaks the chemical structure down with the rising temperature of the vaporizer. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, great question. And that's what I showed you, right? We are trying to look at different concentrations. So you saw that the efficacy was not great with the current recommended dose of 1 gram. So there needs to be more studies. I think the other lab I'm aware of is the University of Florida. They have done some work and published already. We haven't published this yet, so probably in the next few months we will publish these 2 studies that we did as well. So yeah, there needs to be. I agree that 1 gram per box is not the dose that will give you good control. So it has to be more, but we don't know exactly. So is it 2 grams or can it go to 4 grams? I think University of Florida tested even 8 grams at some point. I don't know if they have published the work, but there is a concern for sure about the dose. I think the current recommendation is probably not enough to get the control that you need. I don't know if I answered your question totally there. So MedHat, yeah. So MedHat, you said he thinks, yeah. So I agree that 1 gram probably is low, but we don't know. I don't know if he has any data, but it has to be higher. But I don't know, is it 2 grams or is it 4 grams? So more studies have to be done in that front to really come up with a dose, and then EPA has to change the label based on the data, because they rely on data as well. They can't just abruptly go and change it to 2 grams or 4 grams per box.
Well, does anybody else have any questions? We'll just give you a few minutes to get your thoughts together, because I know that was a lot of information. Okay, so work injured. Is it easier for you to read them, Ramesh?
Yeah, I can read. Yeah.
Okay.
So let me see. So I have a hive that just swarmed and will have a broodless period. Yeah, I think she put it back, I guess, because I totally forgot to answer this one. I think she had asked this before, right? Yeah. Just swarmed and broodless existing, and will be laid by new queen. Am I correct? Planning to treat OAV 2 weeks after the swarm left. Again, I would say I don't know how big the hive is right now. Depends on how vigorously your queen was laying. So let me read this one more time. So it has already swarmed and has a broodless period. Yeah, you can try one. Yeah, as you said, I think that's a good way to do OAV treatment. But again, keep monitoring for mites. That's what I mean. Once you treat, don't assume that everything is gone. So maybe you're okay with one treatment now, but then monitor again maybe after 4 weeks or so and see what your levels are. So if you still see high levels like 5-6% at this point, probably you should be doing a treatment again. Your thoughts on AP Life War. Okay. Yeah. We haven't done much work on AP Life War, but I think I have read enough. It's a nice product as well. So again, some issues with temperature sensitivity. So if you're using at right temperatures in the right way, I think that's a good product as well. How do I check for mites after the treatment? Do I do alcohol wash or just check the sticky board? Sticky board only gives you a broad sense of what's going on in your hive, but it's not a very reliable way. So I would still recommend go do an alcohol wash. If you hate killing too many bees, I think you can do 200 bees, if not 300. 300 is a recommended number, but you can try with 200 too. It will give you at least a better sense than a sticky board. So yeah, I would still recommend doing an alcohol wash at the right. Again, sampling is critical. Be careful, new beekeepers. Don't get your queen accidentally. Ask your friend or family member if they are, or you take time to really figure out the queen is not on the frame when you're taking the sample of bees. Because if you lose the queen, then probably you'll be in trouble. So the next question is 2 deeps and 1 fairly full. So when again, that was the response from the previous one, I guess. And then don't answer if it doesn't fit. Asian bees are able to fight mite. How do European bees do this? how to get the European moose to the same. Yeah. It's all about natural selection. So I know if you remember your high school biology and natural selection, it takes thousands of years or millions of years. I don't know if we have that much time, but Asian honeybees have evolved with these mites, right? That's a major thing. They have developed some of the physiological mechanisms as well as, so we believe that the Asian honeybee has a little, maybe a half day less lifespan. So I showed you those mites coming out of the cells, right? So they don't provide the mites enough opportunity to mature and reproduce as well. And that's why most of the mites are seen in drone brood in Asian honeybees. They're not very successful in the worker brood. But that's a mechanism that Asian bees have developed because they have evolved with these mites for thousands of years. But our European honeybee has not. So they were introduced to the mites in the United States around 80s and in Europe probably another 30 years ago, maybe in 60s or 50s. So that's what the problem is with us. So yeah, it's a great question and food for thought, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know when. I wish I had a clue on when our European honeybees will develop that mechanism, but it's totally dependent on the nature, how much pressure we put on these bees and mites, and yeah, several factors.
So Ramesh, I have a question. Any updates on the resistance patterns to Amitraz with these mites?
Yeah, I didn't put that study. I knew I only had an hour to go
Well,
over all these things. But yeah, we did some Amitraz study. But at this point, I believe based on at least 2 years, we compared some Canadian mite populations as well. So we collaborated with Shelley Hoover, who is a Canadian researcher, works on bees. We thought because Canadians have not used Amitraz, the off-label, because in the US, commercial beekeepers have used Amitraz off-label for a long time. I mean, probably 15, 20 years now. But Canadians have had the luxury of having this product for at least significantly earlier than the US beekeeper. So they have not abused the product. So we thought maybe the mite populations, if we compare the Canadian mite populations with the US, I mean, when I say US, it's Oregon, and wanted to see if there was, but we didn't see a difference between susceptibility. So maybe Canadians are getting 1% higher control, like 93, and we got 92% control with the Amitraz, with that Pettis test we do in the jars with the small strip. There is a protocol that we do. So at this time, yeah, I don't think we have, but we see some off hives. So if I have 50 hives, there might be 1 or 2 outliers, and we don't know why. They don't get much control. We get like 30%, 40% control, but most of the hives would get around 90% control. So we don't know those outliers. What's the reason behind it? It is something slowly brewing, or is it just the way we are testing is not the right way to test for resistance? So there are so many variables there. But yeah, at this point, I'm not that concerned. Maybe we should be concerned about Amitraz resistance, but we haven't seen anything really obvious at this time.
great. Thank you. Well, it looks like the questions have died down. It's 8:41, and we sure appreciate having you come and talk to us again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, and yeah, I know Portland Urban Group. I always I'm amazed how, I mean, you guys have grown so much, and I think when you mentioned Tim Wessel, I know him well, and I think when he was the president, I think that's when Portland Urban started, and there were probably 180. I don't know what your membership is now, but
About 247.
see, that's impressive now. So yeah, so I'm glad you all are still interested in bees. I know for new beekeepers, I would say it's a challenge. Don't think we do everything. I mean, at OSU we have about 100 hives for research, and we lose probably 25, 30 as well, because I know we do a lot of research. We manipulate them for other reasons, but don't be disheartened. Beekeeping is a challenge. You will be successful eventually, even if the first year if you are not successful. And again, you are in very good hands with experienced people in your group. So yeah, good luck with your bees.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you guys sometime soon.
Okay, Ramesh, thanks
Thank you.
again.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.